Welcome Life Science learners to another installment. I'm sure you guys are excited and looking in front of me, you're probably thinking, well, what is this guy up to today? Well guys, we're focusing on a section called nutrition. And in our first segment, we're going to be focusing on dentition. And what does that mean? So I've got a variety of different organisms from herbivores, carnivores to omnivores. And so we're going to look at dentition as a concept in nutrition. And we're going to look at how different organisms have different types of teeth and their arrangement for their specific mode of nutrition. It's important that before we get into the lesson that we overview the core concepts and we look at some important terminology. During the course of the lesson, we will also draw specific attention to some of these skulls and look at the dentition and how that arrangement of teeth is specific to their mode of nutrition. So, hope you guys are excited and looking forward to the interaction. Let's get straight into the lesson. So, as I mentioned, it's important that we look at the terms first, review some main concepts, and then overview the process of nutrition by looking at digestion. In this lesson, we look at nutrition in various different animals. We talk about herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores, and their mode of nutrition and their adaptation for their specific diet. We're also going to talk about dentition and the adaptation for feeding. So, in terms of how are their teeth arranged or specialized for their mode of feeding? Right, so some important terms. We've got to look at the concept of what is nutrition and what does that mean in terms of accessing food for energy. We're also going to talk about some important processes in nutrition like digestion, the concept of what mastication is, and that refers to the chewing of food, and so we see that as an important adaptation based on the dental formula or the teeth that are present. We're going to have to compare autotrophs and heterotrophs in terms of individuals that are able to produce their energy and those that consume other organisms. And then we're going to compare herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores in terms of their mode of nutrition as well as their structural adaptation of the jaws and teeth for that mode of nutrition. We're going to spend some time looking at what dental formula is, and that essentially points to the specialization and the arrangement of teeth on the jaws. We're going to look at the different types of teeth in terms of the incisors, canines, your molars, and your premolars. And that's an overview of the important terms. So as I always mention, it's important that you make note of these terms because we will draw reference to these terms. And if you do understand these terms, it makes it easier to associate a concept when we refer to that term. Right. So fundamentally important is for us to understand what is nutrition. It's important that we know that every individual needs energy. So how do they acquire that energy? Right. So let's unpack that. So nutrition is the biochemical and physiological process by which an organism uses food to support its life. It includes ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and egestion. So those are the 5 processes that are associated with how individuals acquire their nutrition. So again, it's the ability to look at the biochemical reaction, so in terms of what happens with the enzymes and how they break down the food, the physiological, so the changes in the body in regards to what happens with that food in the body, and the processes involved in them. It's important that we also recognize that nutrition is a method of being able to access nutrients. So what are nutrients? Nutrients are those important compounds that we get from food. And these would include things that provide us with energy, that allows us to grow, to carry out metabolism, and as well as to repair. So we need these nutrients for growth, for energy, as well as repairing damaged tissue. There are different modes of nutrition, guys. We've spent some time previously looking at autotrophs, and these are individuals that produce food. We've also mentioned the concept of autotrophic nutrition in the past. What does that mean? Essentially, it points to certain organisms such as plants, algae, and some bacteria, like your cyanobacteria, those that are able to photosynthesize. They can make their own food through a process called photosynthesis. So their mode of nutrition is being able to access food from the sun by carrying out photosynthesis. Some photosynthetic organisms are shown in this figure. Here we've got plants, and we know that they are autotrophs. We also see some algae, and we see obviously some bacteria that have the ability to be able to photosynthesize. And so these organisms have a different mode of nutrition called an autotrophic mode, essentially being able to produce their own food. There are two important modes of nutrition with regards to how organisms access their food. So one is your autotrophic nutrition, which we've just looked at. So in this type, plants and other photosynthetic organisms prepare their own food, and that is how they get the energy in terms of from the sun using photosynthesis. The next mode is your heterotrophic nutrition. Guys, the word heterotrophic comes from heterotrophs. Okay, so animals cannot produce their own food, so we refer to them as heterotrophs. How do they get their food? So they obviously consume other producers. So instead, they get their food by consuming other organisms, which is why they are also called consumers, because they consume other organisms for their nutritional needs. They may consume autotrophs or other heterotrophs. Heterotrophs include all animals and fungi, as well as many single-cell organisms that are able to engulf and use other organisms for their energy requirements. So, as we unpack what nutrition is, it's important to recognize what are nutrients. Guys, we often speak about the organic compounds. We know that those are the basic requirements for the production of many complex organic compounds in the body. So we need nutrients for the production of organic compounds. We also need nutrients that are required in relatively small amounts. So we unpack nutrients into two groups: your macronutrients, and these are generally required in larger quantities. So in terms of your proteins, your carbohydrates, your fats and lipids. But we also have micronutrients, and these are required in relatively small amounts by the body and are essential. So if we talk of iodine, your phosphorus, magnesium, calcium, potassium, these are required in small amounts but are crucial for our metabolism. Okay, so why is nutrition important? Why is it important that we're able to access food? Again, guys, we know that nutrition helps in proper growth and the maintenance of cells. It provides energy to carry out the different life processes. So an individual that has a balanced nutritional meal or diet has enough of energy to carry out other metabolic processes. And that's essential to every organism being able to survive. So why is energy needed? It's needed to carry out important metabolic processes such as cellular respiration, growth, repair, and regeneration. Where does all that energy come from? It comes from the foods that we consume. And through the food chain, we know that energy is passed from one organism to the next. It's important that we pause at this moment and reflect on what we've just looked at. So we've looked at nutrition as a concept. We've looked at why nutrition is important. We know that there are two groups of organisms: those that produce their own food and those that consume other organisms. Let's have a little break, and when we get back, we will look at how individuals access food, and we will look at types of nutrition based on heterotrophs accessing their food. I know you guys are excited to look at these skulls. Let's have a little break, and we'll see you in a little bit.